What's going on, everybody? I hope you're having a good day and I hope you're having a good week as always. I'm here to talk about Iran. What's really going on? Let's try to figure it out because Iran and the relationship between US and Iran is dominating headlines and press this week, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on just like a lot of people. So Donald Trump tweeted this morning, Iran made a very big mistake. He was saying that, I'm sure, in response to the Reuters and other reports that Iran attacked a drone. And the weird thing about the attack is a few things. First of all, it looks like they used the same picture as an old attack, and even some mainstream media is reporting on that. Some people think it's because Iran's lying and saying it wasn't over Iran, or it was over Iran, so they had justification to shoot it down. Whereas others are saying it was over international waters where they didn't have the justification to shoot it down. Of course, that's a big difference. I'll let you decide. Me personally, I'm always skeptical, so I was like, what's really going on here? A weird thing about Reuters reporting on it is they said an anonymous U.S. official or U.S. official in anonymity reported it. So my question is, if it's a big attack like they said, isn't there a U.S. official we could know about that said it? Or don't we have somebody with a face and a name that could report big stuff like this? I'm very, very skeptical of that, especially when I know that anonymous U.S. officials, many of them don't like Trump. Many of them are on a totally different agenda. We're going to get into that in a second. So I would like a little bit more proof than just like anonymous source. And even Reuters, I used to really trust them. But yesterday they broke the story of a 9-year-old drag queen, and they put a bunch of videos on that. So I thought AP and Reuters was like breaking real news, but I found out this year and last year that AP and Reuters seem to have an agenda just like the rest, and they seem to definitely pick sides and narratives and way to report certain things. I mean, the way they report one thing, if it goes in their agenda's direction, is a lot different than how they report it otherwise. So I'm very, very skeptical on many fronts of this Iran report. And I want to say too, we're going to get into a lot of stuff, but Donald Trump really impressed me last month, and he said this, you'll see, he talked about the military-industrial complex and said that there are people in Washington who don't want him not to get into war.
We have tremendous power economically. If I can solve things economically, that's the way I want it.
So you can reassure people you're not looking for some kind of conflict in Iran?
Well, I'm the one that talks about these wars that are 19 years and people are just there. And don't kid yourself, you do have a military-industrial complex. They do like war. In Syria with the caliphate. So I wipe out 100% of the caliphate. That doesn't mean you're not going to have these crazy people going around blowing up stores and blowing up things. These are seriously ill people. I don't want to say, oh, they're wiped out, ISIS. But I wiped out 100% of the caliphate. I say, I want to bring our troops back home. The place went crazy. They want to keep, you have people here in Washington, they never want to leave. I say, you know what I'll do? I'll leave a couple of hundred soldiers behind. But if it was up to them, they'd bring thousands of soldiers in. Someday people will explain it.
Well, this is an example.
You do have a group, and they call it the military-industrial complex. They never want to leave. They always want to fight. No, I don't want to fight. But you do have situations like Iran. You can't let them have nuclear weapons. You just can't let that happen.
On that same note, there were reports that Tucker Carlson was advising him not to go to war. And I've said for a long time, that's the real reason that Tucker Carlson is such a target and that they hate him, is not because he's a supremacist and all these horrible things that left-wing people and media try to say, but because he is actually anti-war and anti-intervention. And he has a lot of discussions and brings on progressives like Glenn Greenwald and others who are against wars and tech censorship. So I feel like that's the real reason that Tucker Carlson is a huge target, is because he's somebody who doesn't follow the neocon or the conservative narrative all the time. So I want to talk about what our history with Iran is, because I see a lot of people on both sides talking about it, and I'm going to weigh in on it the best that I can, and then you let me know in the comments how you feel. So a lot of people are saying, the reason that Iran is getting nukes or nuclear weapons is because of Obama's Iran deal, where Obama gave billions of dollars, so they say, to Iran with the Iran deal. However, if you search the history of Iran and the United States, you'll see that there's videos 8, 9, 10 years ago talking about Iran's about to get nukes, Iran has nukes, Iran's about to get nukes. So I find that although I personally disagree with the Iran deal, I know some people agree with it. I don't think that Obama really gave them that. I think that's a narrative that they were following for a while. I'm sure it might have helped a little bit. However, two things. One, like I said, if you look at the history, they've been talking about this for a decade and trying to scare United States into war with Iran. But also, in this day and age, whether it's North Korea, Iran, or other countries, how in the world is the United States going to police the entire world and say nobody else can develop this type of technology with China, Russia, and other countries that are working with these type of countries, definitely directly and indirectly? How in the world are we going to keep everybody from escalating their weapons? I just don't understand that philosophy, or that, I guess, mindset that people are like, no, we're going to stop everyone from developing weapons. I just don't see it happening. So I really hope that we find peace on that note, from kind of dispelling what people say, oh, it's a new thing. No, they've been planning this for years. And if you search for General Wesley Clark, maybe I'll play a clip if I can, if not, look it up. He's talked about who the United States wants to start war with, and how these countries that we've gone to, whether it be Libya, Syria, Iraq, Iran, it's been planned for a decade. A lot of people call it the neoconservative movement, and there, like Trump even said, the military-industrial complex. There are people in Washington who have a certain war agenda that I personally don't believe is for the United States' best interest, but some people do. That's debatable. However, I think there's a growing number of people, even on the right wing, that strongly disagree with their agenda, and I'm not quite sure that they're looking for a reason or justification to really do it the right way. A lot of people, including myself, believe that they're willing to do anything. They're willing to lie about it. They're willing to do false reports. They're willing to do anything to launch off this war that they've been wanting to do for a decade. And on that note, I want to say that a lot of people around Trump, not just the U.S. officials, like I said, oh, the U.S. officials anonymously said this, so let's ramp up tensions and punish them. Let's talk about bigger officials, people that you know, who have been working with foreign countries and working directly against Donald Trump for the last couple of years. John Kerry took a visit to Iran. Even Washington Post reported that. So you have people like John Kerry of his stature talking to Iran, probably doing the opposite of what the president's saying. You had John McCain, before he passed away. He flew out to Syria to talk to the rebels. Donald Trump defunded the rebels and went against a CIA billion-dollar program. And while he's doing that, or after he does it, or in the midst of doing it, you have John McCain, who obviously is working with the Hillary Clintons and the George Bushes of the world, flying out to meet with this group who a lot of people in Syria are saying is extremists, and it's even mainstream news. I think it was in the LA Times, where we're funding both sides of the war. I mean, it was such a ridiculous mess before Trump got there, that he does one thing and you have McCain and Kerry working against him. And even Obama, when it comes to Russia, he got caught on a hot mic. I'm going to play that clip now, saying to Russia, you know, when over the election or after the election, there's going to be way more flexibility.
My last election, yeah. After my election, I have more flexibility. Yeah. I understand. I trust this relationship to Vladimir and Esther. My last election, yeah. After my election, I have more flexibility. Yeah. I understand. I trust this relationship to Vladimir and Esther.
So Russia's definitely working with Iran and Syria and probably other places. So when it comes to foreign collusion and people acting against the United States and the current, president, it's like everything that they've accused Trump of doing, which is working with Russia, working with this country, working with that country, selling out to this country. It's stuff that they've all done. I mean, it's literally the tactics of accuse your opponent of what you're doing. It's so obvious to even a lot of progressives on the left wing. Only people who believe the mainstream media and the corporate narrative actually believe that Donald Trump is the most guilty of working with foreign countries. I mean, it's right in front of our faces. It's just that they keep that narrative pushing so strong, and they have celebrities, most media, the tech companies behind it, so it's hard to pierce through sometimes. And a big narrative when Donald Trump was questioning or going against the intelligence communities was, of course, how dare you go against the intelligence communities? How dare you question them? Even though, here's a clip that I found recently of Mike Pompeo saying that in West Point, he was told not to lie, cheat, or steal, whatever, and then he got into his position in the intelligence community, and that's exactly what they were doing.
But in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.
So I'm just confused for the record. Are we allowed to question the intelligence communities? Are we not allowed to question them when they themselves say that they lie sometimes? Is it patriotic to just say they're lying, but they're lying for us, so we just have to believe it? And if that is true, that we have to just believe their lies because it's good for the United States, then why in the world are so many people saying they're not lying, they're telling the truth? It's obviously, it's just such a mess, but I think a lot of rational people understand that there are a lot of lies, there are a lot of wars that have been started over false justifications, and if you look at a lot of those wars, not only did they not help our country on a global scale, a lot of them, but they didn't help us financially. Of course, we lost a lot of troops and other people, and one of the most costly things that has happened in the last decade on many fronts is the Obama with Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State and probably the neocons behind them launching a regime change war in Syria, funding rebels when it not only sent terrorists all over Syria, which to Donald Trump's credit, whether you want to credit him or not, he has done what he said he was going to do, at least directly or indirectly. Syria now doesn't have terrorists all over. During the Obama administration, Syria is growing with terrorists. During the Trump, there's barely any terrorists left. Of course, bad things still happen in Syria and tragedies happen, but if you look at the Obama era to the Trump era of how many terrorists are infiltrating and all over Syria, it's a stark contrast. So when we tried to do this regime change war, which failed in Syria, which was most likely a proxy war against Russia, against other countries, and also for countries that had nothing to do with America, you not only did that, it launched a huge refugee crisis, a humanitarian crisis where hundreds of thousands of Syrians were fleeing, leaving the country, going to Europe, Canada, the United States. And I've talked to people in Syria and I've talked to others. A lot of the people who came, of course, some of them were true refugees who were escaping the war, which Obama, Hillary, the neocons started, and others, I'm sure. But there were a lot of terrorists and extremists in that group who just pretended to be from Syria. They literally weren't even from Syria, but because Europe and the United States and Canada have become so weak, and just, we got to help out. You even have Justin Trudeau saying, even if they're terrorists, we'll take them in. We're the refugee safe haven. It's like, it's so pathetic. So you have things like you saw in Pittsburgh yesterday, which is recently they thwarted a ISIS attack on a church in Pittsburgh. This isn't because all Syrians are bad. A lot of Syrians are amazing and it's a great place. But this is because 10, 20, 30% possibly, I've talked to people in Syria and that's what they estimate, I can't put a specific number, of the people who came in as refugees were really extremist terrorists who hate Western civilization, whether it be Europe, Canada, or the United States, and they hate America. So this is what the Obama, Clinton, neocon regime did. They started a war in Syria, they expanded terrorists, and then United States, Canada, and Europe had to suffer the consequences of, taking in and soaking in that refugee crisis, and a lot of these refugees weren't really refugees. And what did the Nobel Peace Prize community do? Maybe this was before Obama did it. He got a Nobel Peace Prize. So it's like, I'm just saying that it's a huge mess in Syria, or it was a huge mess. It's a huge mess in the Middle East, and a lot of these wars that they claim to start based on patriotism, we got to go to Syria, we got to go to Iraq, we got to go to Afghanistan. A lot of them backfired tremendously, and I don't know that I can trust the media anymore. I certainly can't trust the Nobel Peace Prizes and the Pulitzer Peace Prizes of the world. And I want to quote Julian Assange before he got kicked off of Twitter. Something he said roughly, this is a rough quote, he said, if Donald Trump can avoid a war with Iran, he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. He's already de-escalated the war in Syria. He's de-escalated tensions with North Korea. He's done a lot of great stuff, and now one of the biggest obstacles in his path is the Iran war. And I'm going to end on this note because I understand there's a lot of different angles to it. I've talked to somebody in the United States that's a immigrant from Iran, and he told me how much he loves Donald Trump, how Donald Trump's 100% right, and how there are currently Iranian people who hate America in the United States that they're infiltrating. This is what he said to me directly. I don't know the truth at all, but I do personally think, and I want to hear your thoughts, that two things can be true, and this is why it's important to consider all perspectives. One, I think the neocons and the war cabal in the United States, the military-industrial complex, as Trump and many others call it, want to start a war by all means necessary. They don't care what happens to the United States. They don't care what happens to anything. They have a specific agenda that has nothing to do with the United States in my personal perspective, whether it be for other countries' sake, for weapons sale, for their own interests, whether it be religious, political, or financial. I do think that is very, very true, and I think Donald Trump honestly knows that. He said it in the interview, and I think he knows he's surrounded by those type of neocons, as a lot of people call it, and they're not to be trusted, and that includes so much of mass media. I mean, it just seems like all mass media plays along to the war agenda. Even liberal media, the only time that they seem to agree with Trump is on war. Unless Trump's about it, then they're not. It's like they just do the opposite. Sometimes it's confusing. And on that note, I think the other perspective to understand is I do think that there are real threats to the United States in the world. I'm not a total pushover, and I'm not somebody that's like so anti-war that I'm like, I am anti-war, but I'm not defund the military. We need no presence anywhere. I do understand the benefit to having a huge military. I do want a huge military. I do want us to have places in the world. Like, I want us to have a stable military all over that we can be safe and secure. But I want to lead with strength, and I like what Donald Trump has done so far. He economically goes after countries instead of with force like past presidents. So I'm kind of in the middle of, like, obviously I want no war. I think the neocons in the military-industrial complex are lying. But I'm not a defund the military type of person, and I do think that countries like Russia, we have some sort of weird proxy war that we're fighting with them in Syria. I don't think it's over anything that the news says it's over. I think it's a total war that they don't even want to talk about. And I also think that countries like Iran, although I know a lot of anti-war and progressive and even conservative people want to say there's zero threat at all, I do think listening to Iran, I know the news always just bashes Louis Farrakhan and says, don't listen to him, he's a bigot. I actually listen to him, and certain things I'm like, wow, that's interesting. Other things, I hear his perspective from a Nation of Islam, and also he really likes Iran. I think he said that Iran is the only true like Islam, that Saudi Arabia is fake. So I'm hearing kind of their agenda, and it does seem like there is a specific agenda that wants America to fall and wants a whole new world shift. So I think both sides need to really consider that, one, the neocons are always lying and scheming, but on the other hand, there is a threat in the world that there are certain people, and I don't know if Iran's government's in on it or not, that do want to see the United States of America completely fall, and I'm sure that they're plotting on it. I'm sure a lot of countries are plotting on it. I know that a lot of countries are plotting on it. So I think it's the balance of not starting a catastrophic war. I want to also tell people, I have friends from Iran. When you think of Tehran and Iran and a lot of these cities, it's way more developed than a lot of places in Iraq and Afghanistan. A lot of people ignorantly just say, oh, the Middle East, bomb it, bomb it, bomb it. That's an awful perspective to have, and understand a war with Iran would be absolutely catastrophic, way more than anything we've ever seen, probably worse than the Iraq or Syria war, and I don't think that'll happen, but I do trust Trump, and I hope that he comes through. I think he talks a big game. He did it with North Korea. He called him short and fat, and then next thing you know, we have the best relations with North Korea that we've ever had, and Trump opened up the door for North Korea to start talking to South Korea, China. That, I think, was a success in my personal perspective, and I hope that he does that with Iran, because you never want to be weak, and sometimes if you're strong in talk and financially and also militarily, you can create peace in that way. And I know, listening to Trump's rally too, one thing that struck me is he wasn't really hawkish against Iran in the part that I heard. He was more like, there's been endless wars for a while, I want to stop them. And I pray that Donald Trump does that, and I think that's what he wants to do. But he's in a very huge pickle when it comes to half of his own government's fighting against him. U.S. officials are not all on his side. The intelligence communities are not all on his side. The neocons are in his circle, but probably not liking the fact that he won't just blindly listen to them like a puppet like other people. He's surrounded by snakes, and he's also surrounded by an extremely complex issue like I just kind of mentioned on all sides, where it's like, you know, it's not just black and white, where it's like, don't do that, do that. There's so many things to consider, and I pray that he makes the right decision. I think he's done a great job so far, and that's kind of my analysis on Iran so far. I'm not believing a lot of the media. I hope Trump doesn't bite on fake news, but I do hope he makes the right decision based on real news and real intel. But I think he's smart enough and fully understands that there's a lot of traps there. So I know he likes to talk a big game on Twitter, so I'm not really worried about it based on the successes that he's had in the past on that note. So that's my Iran thoughts. Let me know your comments in the comment section, and thank you for supporting. I have Patreon, all other ways. If you don't want to, it's all good. Just share or like this video, or do neither. Keep watching. I appreciate you. Or don't watch. I mean, it's really up to you. But I do appreciate all that. God bless you. God bless your family. God bless America. God bless the world. I have a YouTube channel, YouTube Anomaly Hip Hop, or just search Anomaly, AN0MALY. If you search AN0MALY on any platform, Twitter, I'm Legendary Energy, Facebook, Anomaly Music, Instagram, Dream Rare. You can find my stuff. I'm posting a little bit differently on every platform. So thank you. Let me know your thoughts once again, and let's try to remain calm and peaceful through these situations. I know they try to say tension, tension, tension. It's because the media is trying to build tension to fulfill their narrative. So the best way, in my personal perspective, to stop a war is to stop a war within ourselves. And I always say that in a way where it's like, how are we going to stop war in the world if we can't even stop war within ourselves, within our own communities? So we have to do our part, just like, you know, the president and leaders of other countries have to do their part. So have a good week, stay calm, and just understand that a lot of good people are making a lot of good moves. I feel the energy. It's a very blessed time to be alive, and we'll get through it like we always do. Don't stress out and don't worry. That's the worst thing you do. Have a good day. Talk to you guys soon.